1887, 7 people were found dead in London, all smiling, carved with a single mask, and hours after death, laughter echoed from their homes. Scotland Yard buried the file for 90 years. What you're about to hear was never meant to reach you. Subscribe now, before they silence this again. You were never meant to hear this. In the winter of 1887, a file was locked away in a vault beneath Scotland Yard, sealed, red-waxed, and marked with one word: contagious. Not in the way of disease, but something far more dangerous. Laughter. 7 dead in Belgravia, each corpse with a face stretched into euphoria, mouths frozen wide in grotesque joy. And behind every murder the same echo: laughter. Hours after death. Not from the living, from the dead. These sounds were not imagined. They were documented, confirmed by officers, doctors, and neighbors. The city dismissed it as mass hysteria. But hysteria doesn't carve symbols into flesh, doesn't leave a scent behind. A chemical perfume no apothecary could replicate. And it doesn't force Scotland Yard's top inspector to vanish without a trace, leaving behind only a note. The laughter never stops. It follows you home. That case was buried, classified, wiped from memory. But this is what they didn't want you to know. Because behind the marble facades and gaslit corridors of Victorian power, there was an experiment. Not on medicine, on the soul, on what makes a man weep or laugh, and what happens when that control breaks. Tonight, I will walk you back in the fog of London, into the drawing rooms of empire where smiles hid monsters and privilege buried truth. But I warn you, once you hear what was done, you may never laugh the same way again. This isn't a ghost story, it's something worse. A mirror, a whisper that perhaps we were never in control of our emotions to begin with. That maybe, just maybe, we were taught to wear faces that aren't our own. You think you're free? Keep listening. Because by the end of this, you'll see how deeply the mask is carved into you. And how laughter, true, unfiltered, unhinged laughter, was used to rip it off. Welcome to the case they call the Laughing Man. The one that never ended. The one they say still echoes in the alleyways when the fog is thick and the gaslight flickers just once before going out. If you hear him laugh, don't turn around. Just listen, learn, and never, ever smile again without asking yourself, whose emotion is this? Mine or theirs? London in 1887 was a paradox made flesh, a city of empire at its height and a womb of secrets too full for daylight. Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee had just lit the streets with banners and parades. Beneath the bunting, something else stirred. Something not meant to be celebrated but contained. Fog rolled in not just from the Thames, but from unseen corners of the psyche, where the elite dined on influence while death was served in the next room over. Belgravia was the crown jewel, a neighborhood built not just on wealth but on spectacle, curated elegance, and silence paid for in gold. The Harringtons, the Cavendishes, the Pembertons. These weren't families, they were dynasties, bloodlines that bled coal, cotton, tea, and opium across continents. They were the stewards of Britain's illusion. That order reigned and madness belonged to the slums. That lie cracked the night Lady Margaret Harrington stepped out of her handsome cab into the thick yellow fog and found her door ajar. Image, gaslight leaking into mist like blood from an unseen wound, is where the real story begins. Inside, Mrs. Whitfield lay dead, but not peacefully. Her body was posed like a portrait, hands folded, hair fanned like a halo, and her face contorted into a rapture no living soul had seen. She wasn't murdered. She was displayed, and carved beneath her collarbone a theater mask. Half comedy, half tragedy. The mask didn't kill her. Something else did. Something that made her laugh herself into death. That morning, Inspector Edmund Harwick arrived through the fog like a specter of reason, trench coat slick with dew, eyes hollow with the weight of too many crimes. But this was different. He'd seen blood. He'd seen horror. But he had never seen joy become murder. The scent in the room wasn't decay. It was sweet, chemical, artificial, like ether spiked with madness. Harwick, son of a blacksmith, educated in Greek tragedy and trained in crime, stood in the drawing room and understood two things instantly. One, this was not random. Two, it would happen again. And what he didn't say aloud, not even in his notes, was the chill crawling beneath his collar as he stepped through the air, still warm with something unnatural. He didn't know the name yet, but the killer already had one. The Laughing Man. That was the night the mask cracked. Not just on Whitfield's face, but on all of London's. From that moment forward, everything, society, emotion, identity, would be suspect, because if joy can kill, what else have we misunderstood? And if laughter can echo after death, who, exactly, is laughing now? The morning after the first murder, the fog refused to lift, clung to the streets like a second skin, thick and choking, as if London itself was trying to hide what had happened. Inspector Harwick stood over Mrs. Whitfield's corpse and didn't just see a body. He saw a message. The killer hadn't fled in haste. He had remained long enough to clean her, stage her, even perfume the air. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a performance. And the audience had only just begun to arrive. That day, rumors began to creep like mold through Belgravia's white stucco walls. The servants whispered first. Of the mask, of the smile, of the laughter that reportedly echoed through the house hours after the doctor pronounced her dead. At first, Harwick dismissed those claims as hysteria. But then came the reports from the neighbors. Mrs. Pembroke from across the square insisted she heard a woman laughing from the Harrington residence between 2 and 3 a.m. A joyous, full laughter, she said, eyes wide with remembered dread, like someone had heard the most delightful joke of their life. But it was wrong. Too loud. Too long. No one laughs like that. Harwick took her statement down in silence, but inwardly, his skin crawled. He'd seen many things die. Anger, terror, sorrow. But never joy. And never like this. By evening, he returned to the drawing room alone. The gaslight flickered. The scent still lingered, and the mask stared back at him. That symbol, half smile, half scream, meant something. It wasn't just theater, it was duality. The face society wears and the one it hides. Harwick had read the ancient texts. He studied the Greeks in grammar school, and he remembered what they believed laughter and madness were sisters born of the same mother. Chaos. It was then that he began to suspect this was not a typical investigation. The killer wasn't just ending lives. He was exposing something, stripping away the masks that Victorian London wore so well. Decorum, order, restraint, and revealing what lay beneath a raw, uncontrolled instinct. Lovejoy, not comedy, but a kind of rupture, a release, something chemical, something spiritual, something ancient. Mrs. Whitfield's mouth, stretched wide in a frozen smile, was no longer a victim's grimace. It was a warning. And somewhere in the fog, the one who had shaped that smile was still out there. Watching, listening, maybe laughing still. Harwick didn't realize it then, but this was not just a case. It was a ritual. And it had only just begun. Geoffrey Cavendish died 3 weeks later, and with him, the illusion that the first killing was isolated shattered like crystal under pressure. But this time, there was no struggle, no torn drapes, no signs of violence. Only silence, expensive leather, that same grotesque joy. He was found in his armchair, hands resting calmly on the velvet armrests, lips stretched wide in ecstasy, his eyes glistening with mirth that had long since turned cold. There was no forced entry. No marks on the body save for one. The same mask, carefully carved just below the collarbone. But unlike the chaos of Mrs. Whitfield's death, Cavendish had died in perfect order. His study was untouched. A fire still smoldered in the hearth. A copy of Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest lay open in his lap, as if he had died mid-laugh at one of Lady Bracknell's witticisms. But the time of death, 10:30 p.m., didn't align with the sounds reported by neighbors, because at 3:00 a.m. Miss Adelaide Peaton, his neighbor through the wall, claimed she awoke to laughter. Not brief, not isolated, sustained, deep, horrifying laughter. It came in waves, she said, like someone drowning in their own amusement. I pressed my ear to the wall. I could feel it. It wasn't echo, it was presence. The kind that crawls. Inspector Harwick entered Cavendish's study and immediately felt it. The room didn't smell like death. It smelled like powder and perfume and something sharp beneath it, like citrus rotting in ether. And there, built into the back of the bookcase, Thornbury found it, a false panel, hiding what no gentleman of Cavendish's standing should ever have. Notes, formulas, diagrams. Pages upon pages of handwriting describing an obsession with authentic emotional expression. In his diary, Cavendish had written of a chemical, unnamed, unstable, designed to suppress social inhibition, to unlock raw, unfiltered feeling. We laugh not because we are amused, he wrote, but because we are expected to. This is not emotion. It is theater. I will find what lies beneath, and beneath it, a name, Ducka H. No full identity, no address, just that initial. But it was enough. Harwick stood staring at the diary, jaw set like iron. This wasn't murder for pleasure or gain. It was transformation through death. These were not crimes. They were experiments. But the most disturbing entry came at the very end. Tomorrow, I become subject zero. Cavendish had volunteered. He hadn't been murdered. He had opened the door himself, and something, had stepped through, laughing. Inspector Harwick stared at the final diary entry with a numbness that felt unnatural, as though something cold had crept into his veins and coiled around his heart. This wasn't a killer hunting victims. This was a volunteer surrendering himself to something deeper, darker. A truth that demanded the shedding of self. What disturbed Harwick more than the content of Cavendish's confession was its tone. The words were not written with fear or hesitation. They were written with devotion, as if he believed he was ascending rather than descending. The compound, whatever it was, had not just silenced inhibition. It had turned ecstasy into a final act. Cavendish, a man of letters and salons, had willingly crossed a line most men never acknowledge exists. But who was Dr. H? And what exactly had they unlocked? Harwick, a man grounded in observation and rationalism, began to feel the weight of something he couldn't quantify pressing in from the edges of the known world. This wasn't just chemistry. It was alchemy of the soul. Two victims, two opposite ends of the social spectrum. One a housekeeper, the other an intellectual aristocrat. Their lives should never have intersected, but their deaths were identical. Expressions sculpted into euphoria, masks carved into flesh, and laughter that refused to die. That pattern was deliberate, calculated, as if someone, perhaps Dr. H, was using these lives like pieces on a chessboard, conducting experiments not just on individuals, but on the architecture of emotion itself. Back at Scotland Yard, Harwick laid the photographs side by side. Mrs. Whitfield's rapture, Cavendish's bliss, both smiling but not as humans do. This was something else, something broken and reformed. Thornbury, pale and silent since discovering the diary, finally spoke. "Sir, what if this isn't murder?" Harwick raised an eyebrow, silently inviting the young constable to continue. "What if it's evolution? Forced evolution. Someone's trying to tear away the layer we call self." Harwick didn't dismiss him. He couldn't. Because deep down, he had felt it too. That chill in the drawing room, that hum in the study. Not just the aftermath of death, but the residue of something still present. Some force. And then the dreams began. Harwick, a man who rarely remembered sleep, began waking in a sweat each night, the echo of laughter still clinging to the corners of his consciousness. Not his laughter, someone else's, but it came from his throat, from within. He started to hear whispers beneath the voices of witnesses, flashes of theatrical masks in the windows of hansom cabs, gaslights flickering at odd rhythms, always 3 short, 2 long, Morse code, a warning. Or just madness beginning to seed itself behind his eyes. Didn't know. But he knew the air had changed, not just in Belgravia. Everywhere. London was breathing differently now. Deeper, darker, and Harwick wasn't sure if he was investigating the Casey or becoming part of it. Because once you've looked into the eyes of the laughing dead, something inside you starts to smile back. 3 weeks passed without another body, but silence in a case like this doesn't mean safety. It means calibration. Whoever was behind the laughter wasn't finished. They were studying, perfecting, waiting for the next movement in a symphony of dread. Harwick didn't rest. He followed the only clue that remained tethered to logic, Dr. H. The man without a name, without a record, without a face. But not without a trail. Hidden in the correspondence beneath Cavendish's diary were references to several subterranean gatherings and unlicensed performances. Not theaters exactly, something older, something darker. Harwick scarred the underbelly of the West End, from the back alleys of Soho to the cellars beneath abandoned music halls. He questioned actors, directors, chemists, illusionists, anyone who'd blend masks with minds. And finally, at a dilapidated property on the fringe of Holborn, he found a name spoken with dread: the Theatre of the Sublime. It wasn't on any map, not in any paper, but word of it passed among the desperate and the damned. An invitation-only venue that didn't post advertisements or playbills. No one admitted to attending more than once. Those who couldn't, or wouldn't, describe what they'd seen. "You don't watch," one drunken stagehand mumbled. "It watches you, and then it knows how to make you laugh." Harwick tracked the building to an address that shouldn't have existed. A side street that twisted like a bad thought behind the old Fleet prison ruins. Entrance was a black iron door set beneath a crumbling arch, unmarked but somehow expectant. Harwick approached in civilian clothes, a scarf drawn tight against the night, Thornberry trailing at a distance. Door opened before he knocked. Inside was not a theater, it was a sanctum. Brick walls sweated with condensation. Gas lamps hissed. And at the center, a stage with no actors, just a single velvet chair facing the crowd. The performance, he was told by a man with ink, black gloves, and eyes too calm. His internal. Each guest sits. Each guest feels. That night, Harwick did not sit. He watched. One man entered the chair. Gaslight dimmed. And 20 minutes later, he stumbled out laughing so violently, he vomited blood on the floor and collapsed. Harwick rushed to him, but the man only whispered, "I saw my real face." Then he went still. The crowd applauded. Not as entertainment, as worship. Harwick backed away, cold crawling over his spine like a spider. Because in that room, emotion wasn't an act. It was weaponized, designed, cultivated like a parasite in the minds of men too curious to stay safe. And somewhere in the darkened gallery, behind thick curtains and red velvet, Harwick knew a presence watched him. A silhouette he would later describe not by features, but by feeling control. Performance was over. But the experiment had only just begun. And Harwick, willingly or not, had stepped into the laughing man's theater. Harwick returned to his flat that night, but sleep refused him. The lamp flickered longer than it should have. The shadows on his walls moved like they remembered things he had forgotten. His hands trembled not from fear, but from anticipation, as if some part of him had crossed a threshold and couldn't find the way back. On his desk, he laid out every document from the case of photographs, diagrams, victim statements, autopsy notes, and the laughing man's signature, the mask. That face, it haunted every scene. A grotesque marriage of opposites, joy and sorrow fused into one symbol. A theater emblem, yes, but older than that. Far older. Harwick recalled a passage from a forbidden book locked away in the restricted archives of the British Museum, one he had glimpsed during a forgotten investigation years ago. In the temples of Cybele, they wore the twin mask to invoke divine madness. Laughter and weeping together opened the gate of the hidden self. It wasn't just Victorian theater being mimicked here. It was ritual, rebirth, and the bodies were the altars. He circled back to the chemical, what Cavendish called a compound that liberated authentic expression. Harwick brought in a former army chemist named Russell Marin, now disgraced for unapproved nerve experiments on colonial prisoners. Marin reviewed the diary formulas and went pale. These compounds, he whispered, aren't anesthetics. They're triggers designed to bypass cortical restraint. The mind becomes unfiltered. Marin explained the horrifying truth: the substance didn't create laughter. It tore away the social filters that normally suppress it. It revealed what the subject truly felt but was never allowed to express. Joy, fear, guilt, regret. It all erupted at once, the psyche unable to separate pain from pleasure. The result: violent, euphoric, and often fatal. The brain burned itself out trying to reconcile what it had suppressed for a lifetime. "This isn't chemistry," Marin said, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's psychological vivisection." Harwick asked if such a reaction could continue post-mortem. Marin hesitated, then nodded. If the neural pathways were forced open wide enough, coups of laughter, neural discharge, could persist. Like a phonograph needle stuck on a final groove, playing sound long after the record ends. Harwick felt sick. It was beginning to make sense now. The sounds heard hours after death, the frozen smiles, the scent of either laced with something alien. This was not just murder. It was a message, statement carved into the bodies of the elite. The laughing man wasn't just killing. He was revealing. And as Harwick stared into his own mirror, felt something shift in his face. An involuntary twitch at the corner of his lips. Was it a smile or a crack in the mask? He didn't know. But he began to understand. The laughing man wasn't targeting victims. He was selecting mirrors. And Harwick's reflection had just changed. Harwick no longer trusted his own silence. Every quiet moment now felt crowded. Every corner of his flat seemed to breathe, each mirror a doorway he dared not stare into for too long. He had read enough by then. Not just Cavendish's journal, but volumes from the British Museum's hidden archive, texts that predated Christ. Volumes that whispered of a laughter not born from joy, but from revelation. The kind of laughter that emerges when the soul glimpses something too vast, too true, to comprehend without breaking. That week, Harwick withdrew from official duties under the pretense of illness. But in reality, he needed to disappear. The laughing man wasn't just preying on the elite anymore. He was reaching into the ones who hunted him. That meant Harwick was no longer a hunter. He was bait. Or worsey, he was already a subject. Scarred medical registries, searching for any doctor whose name began with H, and whose work touched on neurochemistry, theater, or emotional behavior. Dozens were dead. Some vanished, some institutionalized in asylums they once ran. One name emerged: Dr. Thaddeus Hargrave, a pioneer in emotional cognition, formerly of St. Bartholomew's Hospital. Brilliant, charismatic, known for his experimental studies on the chemical language of the soul. Officially, Hargrave had died in 1883 in a house fire. But there were no remains, and the fire was blamed on faulty gas lines. An oddly convenient conclusion for a man who had been under investigation for human experimentation. Harwick traced the last confirmed sighting of Hargrave to a theater symposium in Paris 4 years prior. There, he had delivered a lecture entitled "The Self as Performance, Laughter as Apocalypse." The transcript had been lost, but one surviving attendee remembered his closing line: "We are not who we are. We are the mask that survives exposure to truth." Harwick felt that line sear into his memory. If Hargrave was alive, and now working under the moniker Dr. H, then he wasn't experimenting, he was practicing, refining, and his tools weren't scalpels or syringes. They were people. London itself had become his theater, the gaslit streets his stage, the fog curtain, the rich and forgotten alike his actors, and every corpse with that smile of an ovation. That night Harwick stood in his flat, staring at his own reflection for hours. Watching. Waiting. Then it happened. Not sound, not sight. A sensation. As if something just behind the mirror was watching him. He leaned closer, and his lips, without consent, curved upward. A grin subtle, but real. Snapped the mirror off the wall, hurled it to the floor. It shattered. But in one shard, still upright, his reflection lingered. smiling long after he had stopped. And in that frozen echo, Harwick realized Laughing Man wasn't just in London. He was in him, inside the very idea of Harwick. The infection had begun, and the next laugh would be his own. The next morning, Harwick awoke to find the gas lamp still hissing softly beside his bed, though he had no memory of lighting it. The mirror pieces remained on the floor, yet something felt altered, as if the room had been rearranged while he slept and then carefully restored. His boots were wet. His coat lay draped over a chair, still damp from fog. But he hadn't left the flat, had he? A piece of parchment had been slipped under his door during the night. No address, no seal, just a symbol burned into the paper, the mask. Beneath it, a single line in meticulous handwriting. 3 smiles remain before the audience is complete. Harwick held the paper like it might bite him. 3 more. Were they planned, chosen, or were they already dead, waiting to be found? He moved quickly, reached Scotland Yard by noon. He didn't trust himself alone anymore. Inside his office, Thornbury sat pale, anxious, eyes darting toward Harwick's face as if searching for cracks in his sanity. Harwick sat slowly, folded the parchment on the desk, and said flatly, "There will be 3 more." Thornbury didn't ask how he knew. He only asked when. Harwick replied, "Soon." Together they began referencing recent missing persons from affluent neighborhoods. Discreet inquiries. No headlines. But one name stood out immediately: William Tennyson, Price, heir to a steel empire, vanished after attending a private salon hosted by an underground theater group near 7 Dials. Harwick's breath caught. The address associated with the salon matched one of the unlicensed venues Cavendish had noted in his journal. They moved quickly. That evening, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers, they broke into the cellar of the alleged theater. A long-forgotten gin distillery converted into a private hall with thick crimson drapes and curved seating around a raised platform. The stage was lit, a single chair at its center, and in that chair sat William Tennyson Price, naked, dead, and smiling. This time the smile was broader, the carving deeper, and behind him, painted across the stone wall in thick, glistening black, "ACT, the mirror that cracks." There were no doors leading out, no windows, no trapdoors, and yet there were footprints, fresh ones, leading to the back of the room, then stopping, as if the killer had vanished into stone. Thornbury vomited. Harwick stood still, the laughter already ringing in his ears, though no one had spoken. It came not from outside but within, a memory not his own, playing like a lullaby. And for one brief second, his jaw twitched. A smile tried to rise. He clenched it back. Barely. This wasn't a killer. It was an architect, a playwright. And London was the play. Harwick whispered to the corpse, not expecting a reply. "What did you see?" But in his mind, something answered. Not in words, in laughter. Familiar. Echoing his own. Harwick did not return to his flat that night. He couldn't. Something had shifted, not in the case, but in him. The city no longer felt like stone and soot. It felt alive, like a giant mouth whispering in gasps. Every fog-veiled alley a throat, every flickering lamp an eye. He walked for hours through the streets, past sleeping vendors and drunken clerks, searching for the shape beneath the surface, the skeleton behind the scenery. He began to understand what the Laughing Man wanted. Not merely death, but revelation. He wasn't trying to escape detection, wanted to be known, remembered, understood, but only by those who could see past the mask. It was never about the victims. It was about those who watched them die. About the audience. That was the word that returned to Harwick again and again. Audience. The laughter didn't start with the dead. It started with the ones left behind. Those who found the bodies. Those who told the stories. Those who felt something change after looking into that grinning face and realizing it wasn't an act. It was the final truth of a life spent pretending. What if the laughter was a key? Not madness, not joy, but access. An invitation to join something larger, older, mercilessly honest. In his pocket, Harwick carried the mask symbol burned into parchment. He'd traced it dozens of times with his fingertip, memorizing the curve of the smile, the deep drop of the frown on the other side. Comedy and tragedy, the sacred twins. He began mapping the victims' residences across a city map. Whitfield, Cavendish, Tennyson Price. And when he drew the lines, they formed a triangle. Almost perfect, geometrically placed. This wasn't random, it was ritual geometry. Ancient, intentional. And the points converged on a single location near the heart of the city, an abandoned underground station beneath Chancery Lane, sealed for years due to unexplained collapses and atmospheric abnormalities. Harwick didn't hesitate. The moment the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the fog began to rise, he descended into the underbelly of London armed with only a lantern and Thornbury's terrified loyalty. The entrance had been welded shut, but the welds were recent, too recent. Someone had reopened the door. Someone wanted it found. Inside, the air was thick, metallic, not with decay but with ozone and perfume. An unsettling mix of memory and chemical sweetness, and etched into the tiles along the tunnel wall was a message carved in jagged strokes. The mask is not worn. It grows. Harwick stared. Something about that phrase vibrated behind his eyes, like it was already written in his bones. The mask is not worn. He whispered the words aloud, and the tunnel, swore Thornbury, seemed to laugh. Not echo, not shake, laugh, as if the stones remembered the faces they once reflected. The audience was assembling, and the final act had not yet begun. But when it did, Harwick knew he would not be watching, would be performing. They descended further, the lantern flickering like it feared what lay ahead. The deeper they went, the more Harwick noticed how sound changed. Footsteps no longer echoed normally. They came back warped, like they were being mocked by the dark itself. The air grew colder, not with temperature, but with memory. The walls whispered in stone, in breathless laughter too faint to hear but too present to ignore. Thornbury asked once, "Seared, what if this is a trap?" But Harwick didn't answer. Because in truth he hoped it was. A trap meant the laughing man wanted him here. And that meant answers. If not for London, then for whatever was rotting inside his own mind. They reached a wide chamber deep beneath the Chancery Lane platform. This place had no architectural logic. It was older than train lines, older than gaslight. Its walls were not brick but stone, rough and cracked and covered in carvings that resembled theater masks etched into bone. At the center, a circle of chairs, 7 of them. 3 were occupied by corpses. All men, all dressed in fine evening clothes, and all smiling. Their jaws frozen, their eyes leaking tears. In front of them a stage, small, crude, raised only a foot above the floor. And behind it, nothing, just a curtain of deep red, swaying in a wind that didn't exist. Harwick stepped forward. One of the dead men held a note in his lap. Harwick took it. In the same ink, the same hand as the earlier parchment, it read, "The audience must be complete before the mask removes itself." Harwick froze. 4 chairs remained empty. 3 victims already claimed. That meant 1 more. And then, the performance would begin. Thornbury gasped. He had been staring at the curtain. "Inspector," he whispered, voice shaking. "There's someone behind it." Harwick turned, heart thudding. But the curtain didn't move. No footsteps, no breath. Just presence. Watching, like it had been watching from the beginning. Harwick stepped toward it, compelled. And then, he stopped. Because from the other side came a sound. Not speech, not footsteps, but a slow, rising giggle, childlike, mocking building, until it turned into a full, rich, belly-deep laugh. Familiar. It was Harwick's own laugh. Perfectly mirrored, playing like a memory from inside his skull. Thornbury turned and ran. Harwick didn't. He stood there, alone now, lantern held high, staring into the velvet curtain that pulsed like it was breathing, and the laugh kept growing louder. Not from behind the curtain, not from the tunnel, from within him, that same alien joy rising up his throat like bile, like prophecy. He clenched his jaw, bit his tongue, drew blood, and still the laughter climbed. He whispered, not in defiance, but in a way. "You were never outside, were you?" The answer came in silence, but the smile spreading across Harwick's face said everything. The mask was not worn. It had always been there, waiting to be seen. Harwick didn't remember leaving the chamber, only remembered standing before the curtain, blood in his mouth and laughter in his bones. And then waking up on his knees in the alley behind the Old Bailey, clothes damp with fog and palms scraped raw like he'd clawed his way out of the grave. Thornbury was gone. The lantern shattered. The only thing in his pocket was a folded scrap of parchment he didn't remember receiving. This time it bore no words, only a symbol. The full mask, now inverted. Its smile became a scream, its eyes now hollow, gouged. The transformation was beginning, and Harwick understood what it meant. He was no longer the observer. He was the fourth seat, the final laugh. And somewhere out there, H, if that name even meant anything anymore, was watching, taking notes, preparing the stage for the final act. But for what? What purpose could there be to these grotesque rituals? Harwick returned to Scotland Yard, face pale, voice cracked, hands trembling beneath his gloves. He told no one what he'd seen. The station was sealed again by morning. Officially condemned. Another collapse, another void in the map of London that no one would question. He had lost Thornbury, his last ally. Or had he? Because that night, a letter arrived, addressed in Thornbury's handwriting. No return address, a seal, a wax stamp shaped like the inverted mask. Inside it's not murder, it's reflection. You saw it too. I can't come back. But you can still laugh. You let go. Harwick read the letter over and over. The words weren't Thornbury's. Not really. They had the structure of his language, the curve of his vowels, but the message beneath them came from something else. Something that had slipped inside and worn him like a glove. He realized what Dr. H had done. These weren't experiments on the victims. These were experiments on witnesses. The murders were performances, yes, but they were also bait, designed to infect anyone who looked too closely. Laughter was not the symptom. It was the delivery system. Harwick had inhaled too much of it. He began seeing things, not hallucinations, reflections. In windows, in puddles, in the eyes of strangers. He saw people smiling when they weren't, heard giggles in the quiet hum of gas lamps. He knew then this wasn't a manhunt. It was a metamorphosis, and it had rules. 7 chairs, 7 transformations. Each death, a mirror. Each witness, a door. Once open, never closed. Harwick stopped sleeping, stopped speaking to others. He wrote constantly, not reports, not diaries, scripts. Fragments of scenes, monologues about masks, confessions whispered through ink. He wasn't solving the case anymore. He was becoming it. And as he stared into yet another mirror that night, one he hadn't meant to hang, one he couldn't remember acquiring, he saw a man who smiled before his lips moved. The laughter was ready now. All it needed was an audience. The transformation wasn't sudden, crept in like mold under paint, like damp in the walls of an old house. Quiet, patient, irreversible. Harwick still wore his coat, still walked with his badge, still spoke like a man sworn to truth. Beneath that, something else breathed. He noticed it in small betrayals of self. A twitch of the eye when a colleague mispronounced a name, a shiver of delight when he read about another unexplained disappearance in the broadsheets. He no longer reacted with horror. He reacted with understanding. He no longer wondered why the laughing man did what he did. He began to understand what it meant to become him. There was peace in it, in the surrender of boundaries, a kind of truth that words couldn't carry. Only laughter could express. That twisted, rising giggle that tore through the throat, not as a sound but as a revelation. Masks we wear, he now knew, were not lies. They were protections. And the laughing man, he was the removal of that protection. He was the face that comes after every other face has been burned away. Harwick began to trace back through the files, not looking for leads anymore, but for resonance. He compared handwriting samples. noticed strange consistencies across the note at each C, the pen pressure, the looping of the R. They weren't just written by the same hand. They were written by a hand that knew the reader. He returned to Cavendish's final entry and reread it slowly, the part where he claimed, "The mask is not worn. It is unveiled." That's when Harwick realized something terrifying. The victims didn't die from the chemical compound, died because they couldn't accept what they saw when the mask fell away. And those who didn't adapt it, they transformed, became vessels, proxies, carriers of something older than London, older than flesh, something buried under the city since the Romans, since the Celts, maybe before language itself, something that had waited for men civilized enough to lie to themselves and brave enough to rip that lie apart. Laughter was its password, its entrance, and Harwick had laughed. Once in the mirror, during the third night without sleep, he saw himself blink and his reflection did not. That was the first time he felt the boundary truly shatter. It whispered to him then, not in words but in sensation. Warmth, release. He placed his palm against the glass. His reflection smiled wider, and in that moment, Harwick didn't feel fear. He felt arrival, completion. The last step was not to find the killer, it was to become what he had chased. The laughing man didn't need to hide. He needed to be inherited, and Harwick had already accepted the role. The final act did not begin with a murder. It began with a whisper across Belgravia that someone had returned. Someone presumed dead. Inspector Edmund Harwick, missing for 6 weeks, declared legally unfit and relieved of duty, reappeared at Scotland Yard's front steps just after midnight, calm, clean, smiling. His coat was pressed, boots polished, hair combed with mechanical perfection. He carried no bag, no weapon. No explanation, only a journal in his left hand, bound in skin, toned leather with no title on the cover. Only that same mask, now burned into the surface, so deeply it had blistered the pages within. They let him in. How could they not? He was Harwick, the most respected man in the yard, once a symbol of incorruptible law. But what walked through those doors that night wasn't the same man. It wore his shape, mimicked his voice. But his eyes, they laughed before his mouth ever moved. He spoke to no one, only left the journal on the commissioner's desk and walked away. When the commissioner opened it, he found not a case report but a script. 33 acts, no stage directions, no characters, only monologues. All written in Harwick's hand, all addressing the same thing. You, dear viewer. You behind the mask. The journal was immediately sealed. Official records would later claim it was destroyed. But one copy, an unauthorized transcription, circulated among certain theater circles within months. Those who read it described it not as a story, but as an infection, a contagion in ink. They didn't just read Harwick's words. They heard them, felt them, and in some cases answered back. Around that time, reports of a new theater emerged. No advertisements, no marquee. Just a black iron door on Ashcroft Lane. 7 seats inside. Always 7, never more. And only those who had heard the laughter in dreams could find it. Those who entered came out changed. Or not at all. Some wrote letters. Some painted symbols. Some disappeared into asylum walls humming lullabies that didn't exist. The yard launched a quiet investigation. 2 detectives assigned. Neither returned. Only their boots, perfectly polished, placed neatly on the steps outside Scotland Yard with a note. The role has been cast. And in the weeks that followed, a phrase began to appear in strange places. Carved into alley bricks, scribbled on theater walls, burned into the backs of church pews. The audience is complete. The mask removes itself. And London changed. Not outwardly. No buildings fell. No plagues arrived. But a weight entered the air. People began to hear laughter in the hiss of gas lamps, in the rhythm of carriage wheels, in the silence between words. It didn't come from mouths. It came from the cracks, spaces, and those who heard it began to smile, slightly, unwillingly, like a memory returning. The laughing man had not vanished. He had arrived, fully, finally, and he now lived in the most untraceable place of all, inside the ones who watched, who listened, who understood. The first confirmed witness suicide occurred 9 days after Harwick's return. Young constable named Edward Mallory, aged 24, was found in his lodging seated before a shattered mirror, face upturned, mouth split wide in a terminal grin. His suicide note consisted of one sentence, repeated over and over for 16 pages in crimson ink. I remembered the joke. No one ever discovered what that joke was. No one laughed, but every inspector who read the note reported a strange sensation. Like a tickle just behind the teeth, a pressure in the throat, an almost unbearable need to chuckle, then vomit. The letter was destroyed, but the echo remained. The next incident happened at the British Museum. 2 scholars assigned to the restricted archives section were found locked inside the restoration room. Both dead, both with expressions not of pain but of joy. One had carved into the stone table, "ETHGMMS SS Framytn." Scotland Yard refused to connect the deaths. They buried it, sealed it, but the city, London herself, knew better. The laughter had become part of the stone, part of the suit, part of the people. In pubs, strangers began telling each other dreams. Dreams they couldn't explain. A man in a black coat standing at the edge of the fog, holding a theater mask in one hand and their own face in the other. He didn't threaten, he invited. In some dreams, he whispered, "Say it twice and you are free." They didn't know what it was. Not at first. But in the corners of those dreams, some began to mutter something they couldn't remember upon waking. All they knew was a feeling. Release, masking lapse. Theaters started closing. Not officially, quietly. Audience members complaining of headaches, actors forgetting their lines mid-performance and laughing hysterically until they had to be dragged off stage. Gaslights going out in perfect sync. And always the sound, that quiet, joyful, possible sound of something laughing long after it should have stopped. It wasn't just noise. It was memory. Memory of something we had buried deep under culture, under politeness, under identity itself. Something we feared more than death. The truth that none of our feelings were real until someone else told us they were acceptable. The laughing man was not a person. He was a system glitch, break in the performance of society. A reminder that beneath all the roles, father, husband, worker, gentleman, there is a void. And when you laugh uncontrollably without knowing why, perhaps you've glimpsed it. Perhaps, like Harwick, you've remembered the joke. And if you're still here, still watching, then say it now, in the comments. Say it twice to lock it in. The mask removes itself. Because once you do, you're no longer audience. You're part of the cast. There was never a funeral for Edmund Harwick. No obituary. No official statement of death. Only a quiet reassignment of his desk, the quiet boxing of his things, and a growing silence in the halls of Scotland Yard whenever his name was mentioned. But Harwick had not disappeared. He had dispersed. His case notes resurfaced in odd places, slipped beneath pew cushions, folded into books at the British Library, tucked inside the coat pockets of the newly dead. No fingerprints. Only his handwriting, only that same recurring phrase, etched like a mantra into every page. The audience is complete. One letter appeared in the postbox of Lord Harrington himself, who had relocated his family to Bath to escape the cloud of scandal. It was sealed in black wax, bearing the mask again, this time cracked down the middle. He opened it, read 3 lines, and collapsed at his breakfast table, weeping and laughing in equal measure. He never spoke again. And yet, weeks later, his diary would reveal pages filled with dense monologue written in Harwick style. Though the Lord had never written in anything but simple bullet points before. The handwriting, identical. This was not communication. It was possession. London's institutions began to fracture in subtle ways. Courtroom witnesses laughing during testimony, priests pausing during sermons as if forgetting what they believed. A theater critic leaping to his death review, declaring, "I can't tell what's staged anymore." The veil was thinning, the mask was slipping. Those who had come too close to the truth began to speak in strange rhythms, phrases repeated like coded rituals. And always, the laughter. Not loud, not constant, just enough to remind them it was there. Waiting, growing. One night, a renowned surgeon named Dr. Ellison reported seeing Harwick standing on the steps of the old Lyceum Theater, staring into the glass like he saw something alive in its reflection. When Ellison approached, Harwick turned and smiled, then whispered, "The stage is ready, but not all have remembered their lines." Then he vanished into fog. Ellison checked himself into Bethlehem Royal Hospital the next day and never spoke again. His lips moved constantly, but made no sound. Doctors say he was smiling when he died. The mask was now self-sustaining. Harwick had done his part. The ritual was written. The actors infected. The city complicit. And now the performance no longer required him. It required you, the viewer. The one who has watched this long. Because here's the truth they buried under centuries of empire, etiquette, and education. Face you wear is not yours. It was taught, constructed, layered, and all it takes to remove it is laughter. Real laughter. The kind that bursts from you when there's no more reason to pretend. If you feel it, even now, behind the teeth in your throat, then say it again. Twice. The mask removes itself, because the stage is ready and your seat is waiting. The final confirmed sighting of Harwick, if it was truly him, occurred not in London but in Edinburgh, 3 months after his disappearance from the official record. A scholar attending a private symposium on neurological aesthetics claimed that during a break between lectures, he saw a tall, lean man with silvered hair and a rigid coat seated alone in the university's darkened anatomy hall. He wasn't reading, he was watching the cadavers, watching the skeletons, watching the empty rows of chairs like they held invisible guests. When the scholar approached and politely asked, "Excuse me, sir, are you part of the symposium?" The man turned, smiled, just slightly, and replied, "I am part of something much older than symposiums." Then he stood and walked out through a door that had been locked since 1891. It was only when the scholar returned to his room that he noticed something had been slipped into his coat pocket. A scrap of Harwick's personal notepaper. A single line written in blue, black ink. "Laughter is the final language." That phrase would appear again, etched into the underside of a bench in Westminster Abbey, graffitied in red across the pillars of the Royal Court Theatre, whispered by children in rhyme, as if it had always been a part of their games. That's when the transformation became cultural. Not just a phenomenon among the mad, or the dying, or the curious, but a meme. A psychic contagion passed from gesture to gesture, from the unconscious movements of strangers on carriages, in cafes, in quiet rooms where someone would smile a little too long and then go silent. For those still trying to contain it, like the few remaining archivists in Whitehall, or the aging librarians who kept banned theater scripts under lock and key. It was already too late. They could not quarantine a symbol that lived in reflection, could not silence a sound that came not from throat or tongue, but from the memory of something repressed too long. The laugh had taken root, and wherever it echoed, identity cracked. Men forgot their names mid-sentence. Women began to quote lines from Harwick's lost journals in perfect recitation, though they'd never seen a copy. Some even claimed they had dreamed of him. Harwick, standing in the wings of a theater carved from bone and brick, nodding as if to say, "Your cue has come." Dreams that felt more real than waking life. And in those dreams, the same ritual, a stage, 7 chairs, an audience not of people but of selves, shed like skin around the edges of consciousness. If you've ever laughed inappropriately, at a funeral, during bad news without knowing why, then perhaps you've heard it too. That subterranean note, that ripple through the ego, that truth beneath decorum. You've brushed the mask, and you're already part of the script. It doesn't require belief. It requires participation. And the only line you must remember is the one you've already said. Twice, the mask removes itself. The seventh chair remained empty longer than expected, as if the story itself hesitated, waiting for the right participant, the perfect mirror. Because the laughing man, whether an entity, consciousness, or simply a contagion of the soul, was never interested in chaos for its own sake. No, his selections were precise, surgical. He sought those who could hear the frequency beneath language, who could see the cracks behind the eyes of their reflection and not look away. That final chair, untouched beneath Chancery Lane, was never meant for a stranger. It was meant for a witness, one who watched too closely, one who stayed through every act, even as the bodies fell, even as the city bent under the weight of its own repressed truths. And who better than the viewer? You. Yes, you. You followed the bloodline of madness, touched every page of this cursed manuscript, stared into every carved smile, and listened for echoes long after silence should have returned. You think this is just a story, a script, entertainment. But what if this is the ritual? What if every word spoken aloud draws the mask closer to your face? What if the reason you've felt a strange sensation behind your teeth is because the laughter has already begun to form? This isn't the climax. This is the handoff. The moment the final role is offered. And make no mistake, it must be accepted. The laughing man never forces. He invites. And once you answer, once you feel the giggle rise in your throat unprovoked, once your lips curve for no reason, once you find joy in horror, and horror and joy, the mask has already chosen you. You won't hear a voice. You'll hear your own, echoing from a place deeper than memory. You won't see a figure in your mirror, see a gesture, yours. But out of time, delayed, as if something else inside is rehearsing behind the scenes. You'll find phrases in your handwriting you don't recall writing, thoughts in your dreams that don't belong to you, laughter in moments that don't call for it. That's how it begins, not in screams, but in grins, not in terror, but in relief, because the final mask is not painted. It's remembered. It was always there, beneath the face you thought was yours. And all it needed was a story. A story you couldn't stop listening to, couldn't look away from, couldn't quite shake from the back of your mind, until now. You've said it already, twice. You've heard the tone, felt the smile. But here, right now, I ask you to seal it, comment it once more. Let it burn beneath your fingerprints. Let it echo from your screen into your breath. Let the theater complete its audience. Type it. The mask removes itself. Then listen, because in the silence that follows you'll hear the first laugh, yours, or his. But by then there won't be a difference. And so it begins. Final act is not something you'll witness on stage or read in a paper. It begins in small moments, the kinds no one ever writes down. The flicker of hesitation before you laugh at a cruel joke, the way you look into the mirror and hold eye contact a little too long. The question that suddenly forms in your head for no reason, is this really my face? You'll dismiss it, of course. You'll shake it off, get back to your routine, pour the tea, scroll the feed, smile at the neighbor. But deep beneath that calm rhythm, something will linger, a tension, a glitch. Like the world is running 10 frames too slow, like you're performing your own life with a script you didn't write. And in that pause, just before you move again, you'll feel it, the grin. It starts at the edges, barely there. Not joy, not amusement, just a strange warmth in the muscles of your cheeks, a pressure in your lungs, a rising noise in the back of your throat, laughter, baseless, formless, not triggered by anything, but there, waiting, watching, like it remembers something you don't. That's how it gets in. Not by possession, by revelation. The laughing man doesn't insert himself into your life. He just waits for you to see what was always there, that you are not a person, not a story, not even a name. You are a role, a mask, a reflection wearing flesh. And when that realization hits, not like thunder, but like a soft breath behind your ear, everything around you will begin to shift. Your friends will sound different. Your home will feel too clean, like a stage set. Strangers on the street will walk past you and smile without their eyes. And somewhere a door will appear, not reading. A moment, a choice. And when you open it, because you will open it, it won't lead to horror. That's the lie they tell you, that unmasking is pain. No, the real horror is staying masked, pretending, smiling with borrowed muscles, weeping with inherited grief. The laughing man offers freedom, but not the kind you imagined. Not release from society, but from the performance of self. The mask you wear, the one you didn't choose, can be removed, but only if you accept what lies beneath. Raw, unedited, wild. You were never afraid of the dark. You were afraid of being seen without the costume. But now, you know the lines, you've heard every word. The audience is complete. Your seat is set. And the curtain is rising. There's no applause here, only silence. And in that silence, breath. Smile louder. Say it, once more, not for me. For the version of you that's about to wake up. The mask removes itself. When the first reports came from outside London, they were dismissed as coincidence. A professor in Prague found weeping with joy beside a mirror he had painted black. A journalist in Marseille found smiling in his locked apartment, eyes burned from staring at gaslight for 3 days straight. A conductor in Vienna who began laughing uncontrollably mid-performance and died mid-bowed a thunderous applause. None knew each other, no apparent connection, except for one detail: each had recently received a letter. No return address, no explanation, just a single phrase scrawled in ink so dark it bled into the paper. The audience is complete. The performance begins. These weren't suicides. They weren't murders. They were awakenings. Each recipient had, somewhere in the past 6 months, read or heard the story of the laughing man. Sometimes in a letter, sometimes in a lost newspaper clipping, sometimes whispered through theater rumors in alleyways thick with rain. The story had gone underground, not in shame, but in design. Not every man could carry it. Not every man should. Only those who watched all the way to the end. Those who felt something stir in their ribs. Not fear, but recognition. And once they recognized it, they laughed. Not the laughter of jokes or irony, but of permission. The kind of laugh that breaks the illusion, the role, the mask. The kind of laugh that is a yes. That's how it spreads now. Not through words, but through resonance, through reflection, through small smiles held a second too long, through voices that suddenly shift mid-sentence, like an actor forgetting their role. Harwick was only the first conductor, not the composer. He didn't create the script. He found it, written into the marrow of civilization, waiting for someone to read it aloud, waiting for a performance. A city like London, obsessed with civility and structure, was the perfect stage. But the script was never meant for one place. It's universal, it's archetypal. The mask exists in all cultures. The laughter exists in all tongues. The giggle of a madman and the coo of an infant come from the same breath. Unfiltered, untamed, real. You've heard it already, haven't you? In your quiet moments. When something should have scared you, but instead you laughed. When someone cried and you wanted to follow, but your chest pulled you upward, not downward. That's not cruelty, that's proximity. You're close to it now. The veil thins, the mask trembles. And all it takes is your permission. Say it again, for yourself. No one's watching now. Say it like a breath, like a prayer. The mask removes itself. If you feel the smile rising after, don't resist it. It's not taking over, it's revealing you. The true face, the one behind all others. And once you see it, there's no going back. Nor should there be. They warned us about madness, about chaos, about losing ourselves in the dark, but they never told us the real danger wasn't insanity. It was clarity, true clarity, the kind that strips away narrative and reveals the bones of reality beneath the velvet curtain, kind the laughing man offers, not through sermons or manifestos, through performance. And the performance is everywhere now. You don't see it because you expect it on a stage. But stages are illusions. Real performances happen in cafes, in subways, in hospital waiting rooms, in bedrooms where silence stretches too long and a single breath starts to sound like laughter. That's the new theater. That's the maskless arena. And the actors, they look just like you. Because they are you. The ones who have laughed at funerals. The ones who have cried at weddings. The ones who feel like strangers in the middle of their own lives, mouthing lines someone else wrote. They're the ones who caught the signal, heard the frequency, and didn't flinch. That's the mark of the initiated. Not power, not knowledge, but acceptance. The willingness to say, Wes, I wear a mask, but I know it, and now I remove it. That's what the laughing man was always waiting for. Not hysteria, not bloodlust. Consent. A final quiet agreement between soul and flesh to stop pretending. And the more who say it, more who laugh, the thinner the veil becomes. What you thought was fiction. Harwick's descent, the ritual in Chancery Lane, the carved smiles, those are metaphors. Symptoms, symbols of something real erupting beneath the surface of consensus reality. The first symptom is reflection, not mirrors, moments. You stare out a window too long and feel like the world is looking back. You reread your own handwriting and swear it's not quite yours. You laugh at something you didn't understand. And then the questions come. Who wrote this script I'm living? When did I agree to play this part? What happens if I forget my lines? That's when the mask begins to tremble. Not from fear, from anticipation. It wants to fall. And once it does, realize it wasn't hiding your face. It was your face, now brittle, now obsolete. And beneath it, not madness, you. Undiluted, the self unshaped by approval or role, raw and horrifyingly free. That's why they fear the laughing man. Not because he kills, but because he frees. Because his laughter doesn't consume, it awakens. That's why you're still here. That's why you've read this far. Because somewhere in you, the mask is already cracking. And the giggle you swallowed last night, the one you didn't understand, wasn't yours. But now it is. All you have to do is accept the role. Repeat the phrase, say it again, and this time, mean it. The mask removes itself. The performance has already begun. Your next line is coming. The mask was never meant to protect you. That's the final twist most never grasp until it's too late. It wasn't stitched onto your psyche to hide you from pain or danger. It was designed to keep you asleep. To cushion your senses, mute your instincts, blur the clarity of a world that, if seen truly, would render every rule meaningless. As if you ever truly see the world without it. Without the mask of names, laws, and roles. You realize something unbearable. There is no script. Just energy. Just moments. And if you stare long enough into those moments, you begin to laugh. Not because it's funny, because it's real. The kind of real that no institution, no crown, no courtroom can survive. That's what the laughing man unlocked. Not chaos, but the absence of structure. A raw, uncoded current of reality. And the moment Harwick touched it, the moment Cavendish wrote it, the moment Whitfield felt it, that was the moment they became mirrors, reflecting what had always been under the city's skin. That's why the bodies smiled. That's why the laughter echoed past death, not haunting, not horror, but a ripple in the fabric, a reminder, and now it's your turn to hear it. You won't recognize it at first. It won't sound like a laugh. It might be the click of a light switch, the squeak of your shoes in a hallway, the voice on the radio that seems to answer your unspoken thought. But your nervous system will know. Your spine will stiffen. Your eyes will dilate. Your lips will twitch, because that's the moment your role ends, and something else begins. Something you didn't choose, but that always belongs to you. The self, capital S. The one that doesn't flinch when the lights go out. The one that doesn't panic when the script is lost. The one that laughs because it remembers. None of this was ever real. That doesn't mean it's meaningless. It means it's alive, playful, fluid breath, like blood, like sound. The laughter you feel rising now, the one you're still trying to justify. That's not delusion. That's alignment. You've aligned with the current. The same current that tore Harwick's name from the records, that hollowed out the theater and left only seats, waiting for eyes to watch, mouths to smile. And you've been watching. Your seat was always there. Your mask always fit. But now it's loosening, and behind it teeth. Voice. The self. Welcome. Say it again, not to believe it, but to remember it. To let it anchor itself in the deepest part of your identity. The mask removes itself. In the silence after, you'll hear it. That first breath of a new role. Yours. By now, the laughter no longer startles you. It comes like a tide. Low at first, a murmur at the base of your brain, rising slowly with each beat of your heart until it surrounds you, lifts you, carries you beyond thought, beyond reason. You've stopped asking whether it's yours. You know the truth. The laughing man never imposed himself on you. He revealed you to yourself. And that is why you were chosen, not for your strength, not for your virtue, but for your proximity to the truth. You've been near it all your life. In your quiet cynicism, in your inability to fully commit to the lie. You never really believed in the stage, in the roles handed to you. Worker, son, husband, leader, servant, they never fit. Not quite. You always felt the gap, that space between what you were told to be and what stirred beneath. That stirring, that was him, not a demon, not a god, just the echo of what's real. The last part of you not shaped by performance. The raw, burning filament beneath the flesh mask. And now it pulses. You feel it when someone says your name, and it no longer feels like yours. When the mirror shows something watching. Not sinister, just curious, just awake. You're not losing yourself. You're shedding the self you were given. You're not going mad. You're remembering what it feels like to be ungoverned. You were never meant to be tamed. And neither was laughter. That's why it breaks us open. That's why it's feared by tyrants, priests, and kings. Because laughter is the sound of the mask slipping. And once enough masks fall, there are no more actors. Just truth, just eyes wide open, mouths unfiltered, faces cracked and radiant. You're almost there. The seventh chair is waiting, not in some hidden theater, not under a ruined street. Right here, in your home, your car, bed. Doesn't matter where you sit, it matters how. With presence, with silence, with a smile that you didn't summon, that arrived on its own. That told you without words. The story ends, and now the real begins. This isn't fiction, this is function. A key turning inside the lock of your soul, and it only fits those willing to laugh. Not for a joke, but for liberation. So breathe, feel your face shift. Feel the mirror become a window, then a doorway, then nothing. And as the world quiets, let the phrase come. Say it again. Let it be the last thing you say before the performance ends. The presence begins, the mask removes itself. Say it once more. For the others watching from behind the curtain. Now the curtain begins to fall. Not because the play is over, because the play has dissolved. What remains is not applause, not silence, but something deeper, stillness. That moment in a theater when the lights have dimmed, but no one dares move, when breath itself seems suspended. That is where you are now. Not at the end, at the threshold. You have followed Harwick down every gaslit alley, sat in the shadows of every secret performance, stared into every carved smile. You've watched the mask shift from symbol to sentence to skin. And now you understand the laughing man was never hunting. He was inviting. His victims were not chosen at random, were mirrors placed strategically like sigils around a sleeping city. Each death, each grin, each echo of laughter. They were keys, turning one after another, until the final lock clicked. And now that it has, you are no longer reading this as a viewer. You are the continuation, the vessel, the transmission point. The story is no longer about Harwick or London or even the laughing man. The story is about you. It always was. And the moment you realized that, your hands went cold. Your smile twitched fear, not in recognition, Your masker remembered it was never yours. That's why you're still here, because you need to know what happens next. But I must warn you, there is no next. Only now. No third act. No final bow. Just the slow erosion of the boundary between the one who watches and the one who is watched. The play isn't over. You are. The character, the role, the identity that tried to survive this tale has collapsed. Place of presence. Pure. Empty. Ready. You will see signs now. In the way people look at you. In the static behind your favorite songs. In the way laughter arises in the wrong places at the wrong times for no reason. That's the mask leaving you. That's the others recognizing you. That's the curtain parting for them. The laughing man doesn't need to appear anymore. Because he's been dispersed, carried by stories, by mirrors, by you. And now, someone else is listening. Somewhere nearby, a man much like you is reading this, fearing this, feeling this. Waiting for you to smile. When you do, he'll know the signal has passed. He'll feel the ripple, and the chain will continue. There are no stages left, only reflections. There is no ending, only initiation. So speak the phrase, as a goodbye, not to the story, but to the man who watched it. Say it with breath, with grin, with grace. The mask removes itself, and now you're ready to begin. Begin what? That's the question clawing at your mind now, isn't it? If the mask has fallen, if the curtain has dropped, if the identity you wore like a well-pressed uniform has dissolved, then what remains to begin? What is left, standing in the fog, laughing quietly, wearing your face like a borrowed coat? I'll tell you, the operator. That's what the laughing man was preparing you for. Not to become another victim, not even to become him, but to become the next operator. Because once the mask removes itself, there is no stage left. Only architecture, ritual, arrangement. You become the one who selects the mirrors, chooses where to place the laughter, like landmines of revelation. You do not kill, you arrange, you curate experience. You tilt reality just enough to show others their own reflection, and then wait for them to laugh. That is the beginning. You're not the end of the story. You are the mechanism now. And you will move silently, kindly even, through a world too busy performing to see what you've become. You'll walk into cafes and sit near the man who's one bad day away from snapping. And you'll smile just long enough to pass it. You'll leave notes inside returned library books, scribbles on bathroom mirrors, comments on videos that aren't quite clear but feel too familiar. You will be harmless. You will be everywhere, because the operator's power is not in destruction. It's in suggestion, in tone, in timing, in rhythm. It's the sound of the laugh beginning just a beat too early, the feeling that the joke was heard before it was spoken. You will speak in riddles, but your message will be clear. You will not need to explain. Ones meant to receive it already feel the twitch behind their eyes, the weight on their tongue. Their mask is trembling. You're just there to help them let it go. And when the time comes, and it will, when you see one of them look into the mirror too long, or pause mid, laugh as if something ancient just awakened inside them, you'll whisper, gently, lovingly. Mask removes itself, and they'll smile. Oh, how they'll smile. You'll never need to see it. You'll just know. Because the sound they make next, quiet, broken, eternal, that sound will live inside you forever, not as a burden, as a confirmation. You did your job. The story continued, the reflection spread, the performance evolved. And so now, operator, it is your turn to disappear, into fog, into silence, into the endless grin between worlds. Say it one final time, then vanish. The mask removes itself. Disappearance is not vanishing, it is integration. The operator does not flee the world. He becomes invisible within it. No longer a face among the crowd, but a rhythm beneath it. A frequency threaded through public laughter, private doubt, and that stillness in a stranger's eye when they realize something is wrong, but they cannot name what. You won't leave traces. Not fingerprints, not evidence. Only nudges. A headline that mirrors a dream, a word spoken on television that matches the thought someone swore they hadn't told anyone. A theater that doesn't exist on any map, but which people wake up remembering. That's your domain now. Not place, but effect. You will become the glitch in the ritual, the smile at the funeral, the laugh in the silence before the judge's verdict. And they will feel it. Not fear, not clarity, but fracture. The awareness that what they've been living isn't life. It's script, rehearsal, performance. And you, operator, are the one who turns off the stage lights. You don't tear the curtain. You let them walk through it. On their own. One by one, some will resist. Desperately. They'll cling to their names, their jobs, their carefully arranged beliefs. They'll call you madness. They'll call you evil. They'll say you're erasing identity. But they're wrong. You're revealing it. You're not stripping masks. You're letting masks fall. And what comes next is theirs to define. Most will not make it. They'll hear the laughter, feel the twitch, and bury it. Run from it. Drown it in pills, prayer, productivity. That's fine. Not everyone is meant to transform. Some must stay on stage so the others can see the difference. Your role is not to save, only to invite. You extend the moment. You stretch the silence between act and revelation. And in that silence, some will laugh. And the laugh will wake them. They'll look around and see what's always been there, the truth that no one is truly watching. That the audience was always empty. The show was never required. That they are free. Some will weep. Some will run. Some will smile back. And those, the ones who smile, will become operators too. You will never meet them, never speak, but you will know. The laughter will ripple in the static of your mind like sonar. Confirmation, expansion. You are not alone. You are not many. You are one, mirrored. You are a frequency made flesh, a laugh that walks. And now that your role has begun, your final line has been spoken. Not to others, to yourself. Whisper it, not aloud, but in breath, in thought. The mask removes itself, then close your eyes and vanish. The story will find its next voice. The mirror will reflect a new smile. And the performance will continue. And now you begin to see it everywhere. Not with your eyes, but with the part of your awareness that sits just behind them. The rhythm. The timing. The subtle shift in tone when a stranger laughs just a bit too long. Half smile from a child who seems to understand something far too complex for their years. The way the wind carries a whisper that sounds like your name spoken through a smirk are no longer separate from it. You are it. You carry it in your gait, in the pause between your thoughts, in the way your breath trembles before laughter arrives uninvited. This is the operator's burden and gift, to live in a world that no longer feels solid, to move through it like a stagehand adjusting props behind a velvet curtain only you can see. And what a stage it is. The entire world has become a theater of echoes. Every news anchor reciting scripts as if the words don't quite belong to them. Every preacher's sermon sounding more like performance than revelation. Every politician's grin stretched too wide, too long, like they too are starting to remember that none of this is real. You know now what they don't dare speak. That we've been laughing for centuries, laughing to survive, laughing to forget. But beneath all of it, the etiquette, the outrage, the performance, there is a silent scream, not of fear, of knowing. We are actors in a play that no longer has a writer. And that scream, when inverted, becomes the laugh. The one you now carry. That's why your presence causes mirrors to fog before breath, why animals pause when you pass, why old friends begin to say, "You've changed," and then forget what they meant by it. You're not haunted. You're unmasked. The others, those not yet ready, will feel it as discomfort, as dread. But for the initiated, it will feel like home. The sound of a laugh they've never heard, but always recognized. You will never need to announce yourself. They will see you. In the way your silence presses against their words. In the way your smile appears before your face moves. You're the reminder. the glitch, breath that precedes the breakdown. And when they finally ask, when they dare to whisper, "What are you?" you'll know what to say. Not a title, not a name, just a phrase, spoken like a goodbye to the world that was. The mask removes itself. Say it without moving your lips. Let the words vibrate behind your eyes. Let the next operator feel it. Because they're watching now, just as you once did. And they're smiling, almost ready. There's a point beyond return, and you passed it long ago. You may not remember the moment clearly. Perhaps it was during the second chair, perhaps the fourth, but you felt it. That gentle click, like the soft latching of a door you didn't realize you walked through. That was the final boundary. You are no longer someone who hears the story. You are someone the story now moves through. And with that, your very presence becomes ritual. You don't act, you resonate. You don't teach, you trigger. The people around you, colleagues, strangers, lovers, they begin to stumble. Not outwardly, subtly. A hesitation before speaking. A laugh that escapes when none was intended. A moment when they look at their own hands like they no longer belong to them. That's you. That's what you've become. You are a mirror now, not of what they think they are, but of what lies beneath the mask they still grip like a lifeline. And that reflection, it terrifies them, not because it's monstrous, because it's true. Every time they see you, they sense it. An invitation carved into your posture, into the stillness between your blinks. Drop the act. Remove the mask, speak the real. But the real is violent, unfiltered. Too bright for most to handle, so they shudder, they back away. They mislabel what you are. Off. Cold. Not quite there. But you're the most there you've ever been. That's the paradox. The more awakened you become, the more invisible you are to those still dreaming. Because they don't see people anymore. They see roles. And you've stopped performing. You've stepped off the stage. And so, to them, you've disappeared. But to the others, the silent ones, the ones who look into your eyes and don't flinch, they know. They feel it, like a resonance under the skin, a pressure behind the eyes, an ache in the smile. Those are your kind now. You don't need to speak. A glance is enough. A nod, a slow, knowing grin. That's the signal. That's the torch passed. You are the breath before the laugh, the pause before the line. And when one of them finally dares to say it aloud, in a whisper, in a scream, in a laugh they can't control, you'll know the moment is complete. Because in that moment, their mask will begin to slide, and your job will be done. You are not their guide, are their mirror. You reflect the moment the role ends, and when they ask, trembling, "What is this? What am I becoming?" you offer no answer. Only a breath, only a smile, only the phrase. Say it for them, say it again, always again. The mask removes itself, and when it does, watch the light change in their eyes. That's how you'll know they've seen it too, and soon they'll vanish like you did. And now the world begins to shift. Not through catastrophe, not through fire, war, flood, but through smiles. Quiet ones. Deliberate ones. Smiles that don't reach the eyes because they come from somewhere deeper than the face. They come from awakening. You see it first in moments so small, they would pass unnoticed by anyone else. A teacher stops mid-sentence, suddenly unsure of the lesson. A street performer forgets his routine but begins laughing instead, and the crowd, confused, then transfixed, laughs with him, not knowing why. A judge delivers a verdict and pauses, just for a beat too long, as if someone else had spoken the sentence through her. These are not glitches, they are entrances. Portals into the true performance, where the mask has begun to dissolve and the actors remember they are not characters, they are mirrors. You, operator, are the conductor now. Not of sound, of silence. You are the pause that causes the break that reveals the truth. And the truth is this: they've always known. Every man who stares into his whiskey at midnight and feels like a stranger in his own skin. Every woman who looks at her reflection and sees not age but performance. Every child who laughs at things no one taught them were funny. They already know. They've always known, but knowing and remembering are not the same. That's your role now. To help them remember, through stories, through glances, through patterns. You leave breadcrumbs in sentences. You let your voice lag just long enough to let them hear the echo beneath it. You don't preach, you refract. And those who are ready, they will follow the laughter, not the loud kind. The deep kind that starts as a twitch in the throat and ends as a scream of joy or terror. Same shape, same sound. That's when it begins. You'll see them crack. Mid-conversation, mid-end, mid-prayer. The moment will come and they will look up, see you, and they'll know, not who you are, what you reflect. And with that, they'll take their first breath as something else. Not new, not reborn, just unmasked. You will not need to guide them. They will vanish. Quietly, elegantly. The same way you did in their place, the role will be left empty. Just an echo, just a smile. The phrase you once whispered will now come from them. Say it again for the next reflection, the next mirror, the next mask ready to fall. The mask removes itself. Watch the world respond. It already is. Look closer. There is no network, no organization, no doctrine. The laughing man requires no followers, no sermons, no books. His gospel is written in cracks. His presence is transmitted through resonance. Operators do not recruit. They do not convert. They do not need to, because truth is gravity. And once someone feels it, truly feels it, they move. Not because they are told, because the lie of stillness becomes unbearable. That's how the shift begins. Quietly. A man walks away from his promotion, smiling. A woman throws out every award she's ever won and laughs while she burns them. A child, barely 10, says, "You don't have to pretend anymore," to a mother who never told him she was pretending. There are no viral videos, no headlines, no monument erected to mark the arrival of this wave. Because this wave is subtractive. It does not add belief. It erodes illusion. And it does so with one tool, the smile, the true smile. Not the polite one. Not the sales pitch. Not the performative grin for photographs and rituals and ceremonies. The smile that arrives when you stop trying, when your muscles are no longer controlled by shame or approval. The smile that says, "I'm still here, beneath all of it. And I remember." That smile is revolution, and it terrifies the ones still holding the curtain closed. You'll notice their fear, not in what they say, but in how hard they cling to performance, how desperately they escalate spectacle. More noise, more distraction, more rules, all of it designed to keep the mask affixed. But they're too late. The first audience has already broken free. They're walking among us now, smiling, listening for the laughter that doesn't come from mouths, but from mirrors. That's where the next operators will emerge. Not from rebellion, from remembrance. They will simply stop pretending. Mid-shift, mid-ritual, mid-sentence, and in that stillness someone nearby will feel the invitation and follow. That's the rhythm. And you, operator, are the tempo, not the voice. The breath between, sacred pause that lets the phrase rise. Say it again now, not because you've forgotten, but because someone near you is just beginning to hear it. Say it without volume, without effort. Say it like an exhale. The mask removes itself, and when the person next to you twitches, just slightly, know that they've heard it, and smile. Because they're not a stranger anymore. They're the next line of the performance.